My Greta was the best girl I could ever hope for in my life. Greta was smart, loyal to the core, friendly, protective of me, and quick to come running when I wanted her. She also had shiny fur, terrible breath, and was beautiful. I bought a Doberman to keep my wife Kelsey safe during my travels. But she didn't want to help with the training Greta needed as a puppy. Initially, all of Greta's commands were in German, on the advice of her trainer. But I taught her a few simple commands in English for Kelsey. Greta became more attached to me than to my wife. She was mine, but she looked after my wife while I was away because Kelsey was mine too. At least that's what I thought. So it was not surprising that she was patiently waiting for me when I opened the door to our house. Kelsey was nowhere to be seen. I stroked Greta's head and was rewarded with a loving lick on her hand. I always liked it, yes. We all have our quirks. My girl whined as she looked at me. She could always tell when I was tense. "It's okay, girl. Everything will be fine." I knew it was so. I hoped this would be the case. Kelsey and I had an argument before I left, not the first time or even the 10th time about this topic. When we met right after college, we discussed important issues long and hard before making any decisions. During her sophomore year, she had a bad breakup that destroyed her trust in men and their promises. One of the topics we discussed was the issue of children. We both agreed we wanted them, but she had been hesitant about it in the 8 years since we got married. Before my last trip, we argued about it again. This time, we made up before I left, and she told me that she would be ready to start having children when I returned. But there was still something. Something was wrong in the way she said it. The words she used. Her wording. I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but they made me worry. Her submissiveness had nothing to do with my wife's usual behavior. I heard Kelsey call from the living room. "We are here, Aaron." We. There was someone else in the house. I now understood why Greta was on edge. I understood why I was worried, too. The house feels different when there is an uninvited guest. "Come on, girl." I patted Greta on the withers. We rounded the corner from the hallway into the living room to find Kelsey sitting on the couch next to a man who looked oddly familiar to me, but I couldn't quite place. They were sitting on the sofa, and they were sitting too close to each other. They stood up as I entered, and he held out his hand to me. "Julien Santa Croix. Kelsey has told me so much about you, Aaron." Now I realized who it was. Kelsey's ex-asshole, the one who broke her heart. I took his hand and felt his strong grip. He then tried to overwhelm her in an attempt to assert his dominance. I didn't like him when I first saw him, but now I despise him. He was a tall man, almost half a head taller than me. A dazzling smile created by the best orthodontists money can buy. Immaculately dressed in expensive clothes that easily cost several $1,000s. A muscular physique, honed on the latest machines by a team of personal trainers. Blonde and tanned like a Ken doll. Everything about him screamed of his privileged position since childhood. He was everything I hated in a person, a rich guy born on third base who insisted that he was the master of life. I started on home plate with 2 strikes and a dishonest umpire. My parents both worked, and we needed food stamps. I worked my way through college and was crushed by student debt. I built up my muscles with hard work at my night job, and then maintained them with the hardware I could use at the recreation center. He had prominent muscles, voluminous, but without much strength. I had real muscles. The flesh and bone vice that gripped Julien St. Croix's hand showed him that some things only come with hard work. The asshole clenched his teeth and with difficulty pulled his hand out of my tight grip, trying to come to his senses. "You have a good grip, Aaron." Kelsey stepped between us, her voice nervous. "Aaron, how was your trip?" I looked at them, looking from one to the other, then to the way she stood. She didn't try to stop the fight, not really. Her position reflected her priorities. She protected him from me, but she didn't care what he might do to me. Yes, everything was fine with them until I returned home. I asked it through clenched teeth. "What is this handsome guy doing here?" He bristled, but Kelsey said quickly, "Let's all calm down. We've already started off on the wrong foot, but we have a lot to talk about." She motioned for Julian to sit down, then asked, "Would you like something to drink, Aaron?" "No." "What does 'we have something to talk about' mean?" Her smile seemed forced, and there was hidden anxiety behind it. "Why don't you sit down, Aaron?" Not cute, not a baby. Kelsey almost always used pet names when addressing me. She has never said them since I arrived. My irritation turned to anger. "I'm negotiating. My work requires understanding small changes in the way people behave and speak, how they open up or close down as circumstances change. Failing to recognize changes that mean a deal is going wrong could cost my employers millions. What I saw here looked like it would cost me my entire life. How long? Sometimes the best tactic is to attack." Kelsey looked startled. "What? How long have you been having sex with him?" She widened her eyes. "You two look very cozy." "It is immediately visible, and it is clear to me what it is. You were sitting too close to each other when I entered. This Julien Croix has been acting aggressively since he opened his mouth, and you're terrified that I'm going to kill him. So how long have you been having sex with him?" My wife, for the moment, started to speak, but he interrupted her. "Even before you got married and your entire marriage. You had no idea, did you?" I kept an impassive expression on my face, sinking into a chair like a man hiding a wound in his stomach from the bastard who shot at him. I looked at Kelsey and asked, "Why?" Julian started to say something, but I silenced him with my eyes flashing. Kelsey sat down next to him. "Of course We loved each other, Aaron. We love each other. But Julian, well, he graduated from college 2 years before me and went off to seek his fortune. He wanted me to find someone to take care of me until he came back for me. You were a good person. I knew that you would protect me, and I could make you happy. So, this whole thing about him being a terrible ex, it was just..." "What? A way to make me want to protect you? Who am I? White knight for you?" She looked away. "I was angry with him. It wasn't just pretend. And we disagreed on what our marriage should look like, which was one of the reasons he left. He needed to be freed from my expectations in order to become who he needed to be. But this was always done with the expectation that one day he would return." I turned to him. "So, how many times did Daddy have to pay bail for you before you got your fortune?" He opened his mouth and I said, "Shut up. In fact, I do not care. I just want you to know that at least one person in this room can see right through you." Turning back to Kelsey, I said, "So what? Was I your backup plan in case he didn't come back? Just keeping your seat warm? Why the fuck did you marry me?" "I care about you, Aaron. I love you. You were so good to me. So loving. I know it's hard and I'm sorry. But what Julian and I have in common is true love. The kind of love that only happens once in a lifetime. And he needed to make sure I was safe and..." I laughed. "But not enough to actually take care of you yourself." "How do you think it should have gone, Kel? Did you really think I was just going to say, 'Oh, go be with your lover and everything will be fine'?" Kelsey looked down at her hands, clasped in her lap. "I know it's unfair to you, and I'm sorry about it. I was really hoping that you might wish us well. I'm not going to stay with you. There is nothing you can do to make this happen. So could you please let me go without a fight? This is already hard enough for me." My voice dripped with contempt. The mask of a professional negotiator fell away. "Fuck you, you self-centered bitch. Is it hard enough for you? You had sex with your college boyfriend the entire time we were married. It was a sham marriage the whole time. And now I have to feel guilty for being angry at the way you treated me. Hell, we were talking about having kids before I left and..." I fell silent, looking from one to the other. "You bastards!" They shifted uncomfortably. "That's why this is happening now." "What's happened? You came to him and said that I insisted on children?" She nodded. When he spoke, I wanted to cut the smug expression off his face with a butcher knife. I have you to thank for that, Aaron. I might have let her slip away from me if you hadn't been so persistent. But now... He took her hand in his and theatrically kissed it. She will have a happy life with the man she has always been in love with. Your desperate need for children really opened my eyes to how unbearable the thought of you raising them is for me. He chuckled, with the cruel laugh of a rich asshole used to getting his own way and rubbing it in people's faces. Understand? I stood there with rage in my heart, ready to kill him. Greta moved from a sitting position at my feet to a standing position, her body tense like a steel trap, sympathizing with my anger. I looked at Kelsey. You didn't decide whether to have children or leave to be with him, did you? You decided who should raise his children. He jumped to his feet, ready to fight, a grin on his face. Yes. And I decided that I didn't want my children to be raised by some beta male. Thank you for taking care of Kelsey. No matter how meager your efforts may be, I can now take it upon myself. Roughly pulling Kelsey to her feet, the idiot muttered, We're going to leave right now. You can save... He waved his hand sarcastically towards our house, the one I saved and saved for. The one I bought so we could raise our children in it. All of it. She doesn't want any of this or any of your other possessions. This is our gift to you. You can keep everything except her. The documents will be handed to you on Monday at work. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill her. But I knew. I knew that I didn't have the slightest chance of winning. Of course, I could beat him to death. Easily. He was a paper tiger and I wanted to watch him burn. But I knew I'd go to jail for this and Kelsey wouldn't stay with me anyway. She would never stay. I didn't want her to stay, knowing what I knew now. Get out! Even to myself, my voice sounded broken. She looked up at her alpha male. He won. He was her Prince Charming. I was just a jerk who took care of her for 10 years, and then I saw it. Saw in her gaze something that I simply could not leave unanswered and live with it. She adored him. My wife has never, not even once, even at our wedding, looked at me with such adoration. She may have loved me, but only as a devoted pet. Kelsey looked at me the same way she looked at Greta. She looked at Julian as if he were a god. They headed towards the exit. She looked at him enthusiastically, and he looked at me mockingly. I let them go just for a moment, then patted my thigh twice for Greta, who followed close behind me. They were almost at the door when I said, Wait, I want to exchange a few more words with you. He turned to me, rolling his eyes. What? God, you lose. The one who was better won. What can you possibly say that I wouldn't care about? Greta, my only true companion, perked up her ears. I pointed at the intruder and fiercely gave the command, Fass. Everything happened instantly. My sweet girl had become a 100-pound killing machine, a homing missile made of muscle, sinew, claws, and teeth. She was halfway to Julian before he began to react, panic crossing his face as he threw his hands up. I rushed towards my shocked wife, a few steps behind Greta. Kelsey tried to put herself between Greta and her lover, ready to give her life for her tanned deity. Greta slammed into the idiot, knocking him to the ground. Kelsey was screaming at Greta to stop. She was struggling to hit my dog when I grabbed her, throwing her to the ground. I outweighed her by more than 30 kilograms and had a huge advantage in strength. We struggled for a moment, but she might as well have been a rag doll. After a few seconds, I brought her to her knees, holding her with an iron grip. It's time for Kelsey to watch her idol fall. I made her look at it. This asshole didn't know how to defend himself at all. He had never had to contend with anything more dangerous than a spoiled canapé. Greta grabbed him by the throat with an iron grip. Julian screamed. Kelsey screamed. I laughed like crazy. Julian reached out to Kelsey and me with fear in his eyes, silently pleading with lips that could no longer make sounds. There was nothing she could do to help him. Somebody. I definitely didn't intend to do this. I growled. Greta. She tilted her head questioningly. To me. Blood dripped from her muzzle as she ran the short distance to me and a struggling Kelsey. Please, God, please, no. It's not my fault. It's not our fault. I love you. Please don't do this. Don't, Aaron. Sorry. Sorry. I'm really sorry. Her words turned into incoherent screams of panic as she flinched away from the animal that usually slept next to her when I traveled. That sweet little dog that had no hesitation in killing her lover on my orders. My treacherous wife screamed and struggled, begging for her life. I waved my hand towards Kelsey. "Kiss Mommy." Greta rushed forward and pounced on Kelsey's face, making little happy noises. I let my ex-lover fall to the floor and stood up, taking out my phone and dialing 911. There was an accident at my house. The uninvited guest was killed. Then I called my faithful dog to me and went to sit in the living room and wait for the cavalry. Kelsey soon followed, ranting and hurling abuse at me. "You'll never get away with this, you psychopath." "I'll tell them. I'll tell them what you did. You are a murderer and you will receive a lethal injection." I chuckled, wiping Greta's nose with a handkerchief. "It's your word against mine." I entered through the garage. I saw a large, muscular man in my house whom I did not recognize. I knew my wife was here alone and I feared for our lives. My gun was upstairs, but my dog, who was waiting for me at the garage door, was next to me. I ordered her to attack. Unfortunately, I didn't know that the trespasser was an old college buddy of mine who came to visit me. My poor traumatized wife didn't tell me in advance. Such a terrible tragedy. She screamed, "This won't work. I will tell them everything. I will tell them what we did. I will tell them that I am divorcing you." I smiled serenely at her. "Oh no, I didn't know this until recently, officer." Was she going to give me documents? Oh, what a shock. Of course, the loss of life is always tragic, but I can hardly be expected to mourn someone so terrible. Can I? I laughed out loud at her dawning realization that, at best, she would create a media circus that would still not end in a conviction for me. There was a dark, cruel glee in my voice that I didn't recognize and didn't like. "But you will mourn him, won't you, Kel? For the rest of your life, every time you close your eyes, you will see the love of your life begging you to save him, choking on his own blood as the light went out in his eyes. If only you had bothered to learn the stop command in German, maybe he would still be alive. If only you and he hadn't decided to treat the other person like a pet, like a resource to be used, you might still have him," she sobbed. "You are a monster. Oh, Kelsey. I am what you made me, both you and him, both of you. If I'm a monster, then what does that make you?" I stood up and patted Greta on the head. "Come on, honey. Who wants a treat?" The best girl in the world trotted happily behind me as my soon-to-be ex-wife fell to her knees, wailing, struggling with the knowledge that she would never hear the voice of her beloved master again. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.